Mysterious fires are appearing in oil refineries all throughout Iran. And while officials are publicly blaming gas leaks, a brand new recording just leaked of a private meeting of IRGC officials proving that they're absolutely panicked at their own people. The very ones commissioned to crush the people are now openly terrified that they are the ones about to be crushed. At the very same moment this psychological collapse is happening inside Iran, President Trump has launched what he's calling an economic D-Day. Three of the region's biggest Sunni powers at the very same time have just signed a NATO-style defense pact that boxes Iran in on every side. And the regime's own central bank governor went on state television and admitted out loud that Iran is economically collapsing. Stick with me to the very end of this video because we're going to walk through exactly how a 47-year-old terror regime got cornered from the inside and the outside at the very same time, and why this week might be the one you remember as the week the mullah's clock finally ran out. Greetings, everyone. It is Live Stream Friday. I'm your host, Dr. Steve, your Patriot Professor, here to help you make sense of the madness with breaking news and analysis you're not going to get anywhere else. So make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. All right, gang, let's dive right in here. This is absolutely fascinating. Iran International is reporting on leaked audio that came from inside the regime itself. It's from a meeting that reportedly took place in Pakhdasht. That's in the Tehran province. And the audio tells you more about where this war is now than anything CENTCOM could disclose. I mean, it's unbelievable. A closed-door meeting of the IRGC's own media and cyberspace headquarters. That's the unit whose entire job is to track dissent, control the narrative, crush protests before they start. They got recorded, and somebody leaked the tape. Now, we need to stop right there because this is one of the unfortunate consequences of a splintered regime. Remember, there is not a single regime right now in Tehran. There are multiple factions, each vying for the dominant leadership positions. So you got the hardliners in the IRGC. You got the Islamic Revolutionary, the IRGC being the Islamic Revolutionary Guard. You got the far more conciliatory negotiators in the Iranian parliament, like President Pezeshkian. You've got the mullahs who are sort of in between. They don't have the power that the IRGC has, but they are not popularly elected like the parliament. So you got this thoroughly splintered factional government with each faction seeing the other as the enemy. And so these kinds of leaks are precisely the consequence of a splintered regime. Opposition forces want the IRGC eliminated. They want the hardliners taken out. So on this leaked audio, according to these reports, these are not regime officials talking about controlling the Iranian people. These are regime officials talking about protecting themselves from the Iranian people. This is a huge development. Those who have been commissioned to crush dissent are now freaking out that they're the ones who are about to be crushed. So here's the context that makes this so chilling. Just days before that meeting, a religious singer by the name of Hamid Reza Rujabzadeh was murdered, and it was brutal. Okay, he was abducted in late July, and there's footage reportedly circulating online showing, torturous mutilation, including reports that his body was actually dismembered before being burned and dumped outside Tehran. What makes that murder so concerning for the IRGC is that this singer, as it turns out, was a openly pro-regime Basij member. Remember, the Basij is the volunteer paramilitary militia under the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, the IRGC. And they're used to Iran's regime. They're used by Iran's regime to enforce internal security, suppress dissent, crush protests among the civilian population. They're the ones who killed so many thousands of those protesters back in January. So to the regime, that wasn't just a killing. That was a message. That was a very real warning that pro-regime figures can now be hunted down both online and in the street. And the lead speaker at that closed meeting said it plainly. The pressure campaign against Basij members, mosque clerics, local commanders is specifically designed to make them regret their affiliation with the regime and potentially flip sides just to avoid a comparable fate as this singer. So what we're reportedly hearing on this leaked audio is that the regime's own enforcers are actually and openly worried that their own colleagues are going to defect because their own countrymen are actively and indeed murderously rising up against them. So it's a classic case of the hunters becoming the hunted. Now, another official in that meeting on the recording reportedly warned that the underlying public tensions of people rising up and taking out Basij members are only going to get worse. And what Iranian insiders are saying is that, in effect, is an admission that the protests never actually stopped. They've shifted away from like the mass street protests to now basically targeting members of the regime, targeted killings of regime-aligned public figures. And so to the IRGC, what that means is that the people, in terms of the mass protests, they're just waiting for the next spark. And these guys know it, and they're reportedly panicked over it. But here's the part that absolutely blew me away, because what really seemed to be of concern for these regime officials was not protests or street marches. It was actually technology. And we've talked a lot about that. I'm talking about it in my Civcosm book on how this is really the first 5G war. This is the first form of warfare that's using AI tech and the like, and even space satellites in a way we've just simply never seen before in warfare. And we could see that IRGC members are starting to freak out over that openly. So for the first time, we're hearing that Iran's own security apparatus is admitting on tape that they're scared of AI, of artificial intelligence in particular. One of the speakers in the room actually reportedly warned that opposition networks could use AI to scan crowd photos, identify individual Basij members by facial recognition, pull their names and home addresses, and then publish it online for mass retaliation. And it gets even more paranoid than that. That same official actually told the room that they should all distrust their own phones. And he apparently warned them that apps like ChatGPT could be listening to them in real time. Talk about ironic, okay? Since, Iranian insiders, those who were opposed to the regime, were doing just that with this recording. They were listening in on this guy speaking. But again, let the total irony of the situation hit you. The Iranian surveillance state is now freaking out over being themselves surveilled. When the men who run the surveillance state start fearing surveillance themselves, the power dynamic is completely shifted. It's flipped. And again, what's so fascinating in all of this is that they're blaming the pervasiveness of social media, Instagram, Telegram, WhatsApp, the very platforms that they spent years trying to block. The speaker even admitted on the recording that blocking those apps only made people angrier. But he still called them the root source of political unrest, rising prices, cultural change. And he even blamed social media for the recent election of Iran's own relatively moderate president, Masoud Pezeshkian. Again, according to this recording, the regime is admitting the internet helped elect their own head of state, and now they can't control it. Apparently upwards, I don't know if you know this, upwards about 90% of Iranians use VPNs to bypass the regime's online firewall. They're able to see what is going on inside their nation the way we are, at least to an extent. So that suggests that the wall the regime built around information has indeed fallen. And they're the last ones to admit it, but we're now getting admissions like that on tape. Now, of concern for the Iranian people is that the regime's response to all of this was advocating more crackdowns, more severe crackdowns. They have nothing else, right? The tape The tape reveals a so-called top secret directive ordering agents to monitor Instagram and document every single protest-related post and anti-government comments coming out of select provinces that are considered hotbeds of anti-regime sentiment. But toward the end of the same meeting, a Pakdasht IRGC cyber official gave, frankly, the darkest warning of the entire tape. He said they should expect widespread, violent protests very soon, triggered by fuel prices and targeting of course, food insecurity, water insecurity, targeting not just government buildings, but targeting banks, targeting fire trucks, targeting ambulances, targeting the entire Basij network. So that's the language of a population turning not just against the government, but against the very men sent to protect it. So this leaked tape obviously does not depict a confident regime, right? I mean, the way the legacy media wants you to think. The IRGC officials could say anything, and the legacy media will publish it completely uncritically. It's being completely contradicted by this recording. The recording is showing a regime that knows it's losing control of its own house, and it's reaching for the same old crackdown playbook because it's got nothing new left to try. But the key here with this leaked tape is that it evidences the internal front of a twofold squeeze or pincer or vice grip strategy that's ultimately toppling this regime. What Trump is doing, as we've talked about many times on this channel, is he's applying a classic two-front squeeze strategy. The squeeze is simultaneously external and it's internal. So you've got external U.S. military pressure, you got economic sanctions, you got international isolation, and you combine that then with internal economic and social collapse and digital era descent, which are both squeezing the regime on two fronts simultaneously without requiring direct U.S. invasion. And so while the IRGC and the Basij are privately panicking, President Trump just detonated an economic bomb that may end up doing more damage than any airstrike ever could. So as many of you know, just the other night, President Trump announced what he's calling an economic D-Day on Iran. This week, the president posted on True Social that he was officially announcing, quote, the most crushing economic operation ever taken against any country. This will be economic warfare and isolation on an unprecedented scale. He went on to say, he went on to warn that, quote, any country, any other country that allows its own financial institutions, its businesses, its airports, its government entities to provide any type of lifeline to Iran will itself face tremendous economic consequences. So he listed things like oil smuggling, swap lines, cash transfers, exchange houses, ship registries, front companies, every single loophole that Iran has been using to survive. Trump said it all stops now. Full stop. Again, he called it, in his own words, an economic D-Day. And within hours, the UAE suspended all trade, all commercial exchanges, all financial transactions with Iran, severing one of the regime's most important commercial and financial lifelines. Dubai banks were absolutely essential for Tehran's economic survival, and they're gone. So this economic D-Day will inevitably cause China to cut its last remaining lifelines with Iran and any other state that doesn't want to suffer the economic wrath of the United States. All told, now there are about 40 official nations that have officially turned their back, formally turned their back on Iran. And Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent did not mince words either. He went on television and said plainly that the point of these new measures is emphatically to collapse the regime from within. Check this out.
To be the greatest coordinated economic isolation in the history of the world. and we are going to them and saying, you are either with us or against us. You want this murderous regime to end. And if you insist on doing business with them, either transferring money, buying their oil, they're doing seaborne ship transfers, then the U.S. Treasury and the U.S. government, they will put its full might and force toward enforcing against you. So it is time for our allies and the rest of the world to make a decision, and we are going to squash the economy of this murderous regime, which that will curtail their ability to project power through their proxies. It will mean that they cannot pay the military, and we have substantial inflation, both food inflation and ordinary inflation in Iran. And what we have seen, I see lots of reports that said, oh, well, this has never worked. It does work, because we have a combination. It is a 1-2 punch. We have the blockade, and we are going to have the toughest sanctions in history. And I will tell you, this will work. It worked in Venezuela once we put up the blockade. It is working in Cuba right now, and it is going to work in Iran, and we are going to collapse this regime.
And in many ways, here's the proof that it's already happening, that this classic two-front squeeze strategy is devastating the Iranian economy. For the very first time in the 47-year history of the Islamic Republic, a senior regime official, the governor of Iran's own central bank, Nasser Hemati, went on state television and basically admitted defeat in his own words. Iran is not, he admitted, Iran is not exporting any oil. They're not making any revenue, zero. They're losing $500 million a day. This is the governor of Iran's own central bank openly admitting that they're broke and financially starving. Again, this is the problem when you don't have a single coherent regime. There's no possibility of staying on message when you have a fractured government comprised of competing messages. Meanwhile, we're getting reports of mysterious explosions and fires that have been tearing through Iran's own oil refineries and facilities, including a major fire at Tehran's oil refinery in the capital itself. So, and now, of course, they're blaming, some kind of electrical grid problem or whatever, but we may indeed be seeing other ways in which the widespread resistance among the people is manifesting itself in terms of this sabotage. But frankly, when all is said and done, this is just the tip of the iceberg for Iran. This is nothing. As Iran begins to implode from within, the entire world order is changing all around them. What's really panicking this regime more than anything else, and I think this is the big picture everybody has to understand, what's really panicking this regime is the realization that the world that the regime has depended on for 47 years to make its threats and utilize its leverage simply no longer exists.